It has worked both ways. With the greater freedom that the peoples in Indonesia have, on the one hand, it has also complicated or maybe added to the challenges of non-traditional securities. If we look at, for example, environmental degradation, for examples. Now, maybe under the older regime, under the Suharto period, the people who were mostly guilty of environmental destructions, for example, were probably big businesses, big companies, while the people were probably just victims. But once the era of democratization comes in, there are greater freedom for people to move, and also the especially during the earlier period of the transition period when Indonesia was in the middle of the economic crisis, the government on the one hand was much more relaxed in allowing people, for example, to cut down trees, to open new lands for farmings and just new opportunities, because there's not much opportunities elsewhere, for their livelihood. At the same time, the government's ability to enforce law and order was also very much diminished, especially during the early transition periods. So that really complicated the matters. We had a real problems. Once normalcy was returned, trying to regulate, for example, the use of forest lands, it's not been easy, because once you allow people in, it's very difficult to get them out of again. On the other hand, with democratizations, the government is of course now challenged in a way that they have to be able to enforce law and order in accordance with democratic practices and human rights. And we have seen that in dealing with terrorism, the Indonesian government has been quite effective. Although people argue that with democratizations there are now more terrorist groups in Indonesia, because people who were not really able to operate openly during the Suharto period, religious extremists were very much under pressure under Suharto period. Abu Bakar Bashir escaped to Malaysia, but once Indonesia opened up, the likes of Abu Bakar Bashir were able to operate within Indonesia because we have much greater freedom. So that created a new challenge. But on the other hand, the Indonesian government has been able to prosecute those who are involved, for example, in various non-traditional security threats in a way that do not create new threats. Because if the government only carried out draconian measures against these people who committed acts of religious violence, for example, you create a new cycle of violence, because they feel that they have a legitimate rights to fight against the government. But now that the government are pursuing at all levels, the government pursues a due process of law, and is very careful about not committing human rights abuses. But at the same time, it is able to act firmly. That has led to a much more successful approach in fighting terrorism, for example. So we cannot really generalize. There are areas where, especially in the economic sphere, where it is probably much more difficult to deal with non-traditional security issues, especially relating to environmental degradation. It's not just big businesses, but local communities are also perpetrators of some of the practices that are not sustainable. Indonesia has been very, very focused in ensuring three things, under the Indonesian chairmanship. As you know, the theme is ASEAN community in a global community of nations. The first is to ensure significant progress in realizations of the ASEAN community itself in the three pillars: political security pillars, economic pillars, and the social cultural pillars. Secondly, to ensure that our wider regional environment remains conducive, and that ASEAN will continue to be able to play the central role in promoting regional architecture. And thirdly, to ensure that beyond 2015, ASEAN will be able to act in a more cohesive manner as a regional actor to provide solutions to global crises and global issues. Now, within the ASEAN community itself, as you know, there are many areas that it's not just a matter for Indonesia, but for the whole of the ASEAN countries, trying to transform a minimalist intergovernmental associations into a truly ASEAN people-driven and a people-oriented, people-centered and people-driven ASEAN. It's not easy, because the fact of the matter is that if the peoples within the respective ASEAN countries are not really free, they are not really the main decision makers in their own country, how realistic is it to expect that the people will be driving the process of ASEAN at the regional level? And I think that continues to be a main challenge. Now, in the Indonesian chairmanship, Indonesia, as you know, is the one that really tried to drive the political and security community pillar. And there we can see that in the political dimension, the progress has actually been less than in the security dimensions. Now, for a long time, ASEAN had been very reluctant to go into the security cooperation sides. For many years, ASEAN countries refused to cooperate on the arena of security at the ASEAN level. Most of the cooperation was at the bilateral or mostly trilateral cooperation. But in the past few years, we have seen really fast development within the security arena, especially military to military cooperation. We see the development, for example, of ASEAN defense ministerial meetings and plus, because they have been able to utilize the non-traditional security perspectives to drive cooperation among the security sectors. We have seen, for example, the ASEAN Directs exercise, the ASEAN Disaster Relief exercise, where military assets and civilian capacities were able to cooperate to learn how to mitigate disasters, for example. So there are, in a way, the mainstreaming of non-traditional securities and the reality that the region faces so many natural disasters have been a boon in a way for traditional security cooperation. So, they have been able to do that. But in the political dimension, it's been much more difficult. The blueprint for political cooperation, which talks about human rights promotions, human rights protection, democratization, for example, there's been much greater resistance from member states. We know that the ASEAN Charter calls for the establishment of an ASEAN human rights body, but we know for a fact that the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission for Human Rights has a very limited mandate, does not have the right, for example, to carry out investigation, does not have a mandate to carry out reporting. Most of the commissioners are government appointees. So, it's much less than what we envisage such a regional human rights body would be. In terms of the democratization proposals, if one looks at the blueprints, it's very innocuous. Even the initial suggestions that ASEAN countries should invite fellow members to go and monitor elections were rejected. So this remains a challenge, and as I said, the idea of trying to transform ASEAN into a truly democratic organization by putting the people at the center is going to be a major challenge for us for years to come. For the government-owned development programs, we can see that the NTH issues of food security, energy security, water are really there. The major agenda for Indonesia's development that will have spillover effects into other areas. The issues of climate change is very real also for Indonesia. The issues of mitigating disasters, because Indonesia is one of the countries that are that is located in the Ring of Fire remains very, very urgent for us. But also at the same time, in the area of political security dimensions, the threats of human trafficking, the threats of terrorism, remain very, very real also for Indonesia for years to come. I don't think that we will really be able to eradicate the threats of terrorism, but we hope that we can minimize, the numbers and the impacts. And human trafficking remain a major issue. Indonesia is a big country where the economic development is still challenged with an ability to provide sufficient jobs. Although our economic growth has been very, very encouraging, the ability to provide good quality jobs for our huge number of people who are mostly non-skilled remains, a major challenge. And when there is very little capacity at home, a lot of time, our people want to go outside, and a lot of the people who want to go outside are women. So low-skilled women who want to go outside, and they're faced with various dangers, and including trafficking.